A 1 2 1 2. A 1 2 1 2. See, mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check, mic check. All right. See what we got here. I, I sure hope everyone can hear me clearly better now. Let's see what we got. Okay, let's see. Love that. Yes. Okay. All right. Looks like we got it. Got things rolling here. There we go. What's up, everybody? This is Rome Madison, and this is the Confidence Coaching Clinic live on YouTube. We come streaming every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Central. Would your team buy into your vision today? If you're a leader of people and you got a vision to change things, you think they'll buy in? If you're an aspiring leader and you've got a vision on to create something, or you have a larger vision on what could be, will people follow you? Or will they just wait until you believe in your vision first? We're going to talk about that here on the Confidence Coach Clinic. Why confidence gets people to go all in. The Confidence Coaching Clinic live every week, 9 o'clock, live stream here on YouTube. Thank you for your feedback, Mitchell Moore and Mr. Enigma. Yo, listen, the reason we go live here on YouTube every week is this is a spot coaching session for people who have to make hard decisions. Anybody can be confident when things are, going smooth, when there's no stress, but how do you anchor yourself in high stress, high stakes situations to be calm, to keep your faculties around you and act and speak with confidence in a way that moves other people to follow? I take this into corporations. This is my leadership development program for managers and executives. We teach them techniques, behavioral science-backed techniques to get them to show up with a confident presence that imbues that confidence on other people to follow you into things they may have never done before. Now, we ain't talking about no, Jim Jones drink the Kool-Aid and everybody pass out. We ain't talking about that stuff. You need some better, more fiber if that's what you're thinking about. But we're talking about people who are willing to follow others because they think it's going to improve their life, or they feel that there's gain there. People won't move unless there's discomfort. How do you as a leader show up in a way that moves people because they're uncomfortable with where they are and they see following you will get them to a place that they've never been? How do you be more persuasive and project confidence into other people that you come in contact? That's what we do here on the Confidence Coaching Clinic. Go to YouTube, Rome Madison, subscribe so you can get notifications when we go live. And obviously, you can find this on your podcast streaming apps, wherever you get your podcast, on the Wednesday after the live stream. We know people gravitate to people who appear confident, to people that exude confidence. And, this happens for many reasons, right? So what makes a group of people that would ordinarily not be together, but they're together in the context of a team. And that could be a corporate work team, that could be a volunteer organization, it could be a sports team, it could be a church. But an organization, what makes a group of people come together and follow someone who's passionate about a vision and gets them to go all in on things they've never done before? And they end up achieving new highs in the organization, breaking records, winning championships, creating new brands, new trends, new markets. Here's an even better question. How can you get a group of people to go all in on becoming a team and committing to do things that they've never done before, going down a path that they've never walked before? When I go into organizations and we're doing this coaching session live, we are teaching the techniques, we're teaching the coaching framework that gets leaders to have conversations with their followers that builds confidence in their ability to find solutions and solve problems. But here's the thing. Many times I go into organizations that are sales, commercial organizations, the life science industry. Cancer research has been my background, but these lessons and these principles and what we talk about in the Confidence Coaching Clinic is applicable to any organization in any field. Here's the question I've got for you. Most people are not in sales. At least if you're not in a individual contributor going to call on people to convince them to buy something, most people will say they're not in sales. Even if the whole organization is massive, you might be in billing, you might be in marketing, you might be in HR, you might be in IT. Here's the thing that Zig Ziglar said years ago. Everybody doesn't sell, but the whole company is sales, because you represent that organization. And guess what? Don't miss this. People buy you before they buy anything else you have. They buy your credibility. They buy your integrity. They buy your product knowledge. They buy your caring concern for them. Listen to this. They buy your knowledge of the problem that they're actually dealing with. They buy you before they buy anything else you have. And it doesn't matter what part of the organization you work in. People buy you before they come to be a part of the organization. And the reverse, if you're a leader, and this is who we talk to on the Confidence Coaching Clinic, if you're a leader, people buy you before they buy anything else you have. This echoes back to John C. Maxwell. John C. Maxwell is probably the foremost authority on leadership in the world, written over 100 books on the topic of organizational leadership. And one of my favorites I came into the knowledge of 21 years ago is called 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And one of those laws he talks about is the law of buy-in. And what the law of buy-in says is that people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision of an organization. It all depends on who's articulating or leading that vision. The question at the top of the show: if you're a leader, are people buying into your vision? Are they going all in on your vision? Anybody can get folks to follow if their paycheck depends on it. If you got a label or a badge or a title, and your review of them, your opinion of them is going to affect their paycheck, yeah, they're going to follow you. But do they really go all in? Do they really give themselves to your vision and your leadership to change things in the organization, the company, or the world that they're working in? What makes these people go in and follow a leader, to go all in on becoming a team and doing things they've never done before? Again, people buy you before they buy anything else you have. Okay, what makes leaders appear or transmit confidence? Let's deal with this real quick. Of course, your credibility. You got to know something. So when you come into an organization, if you're an experienced leader, people give you credibility because you've been there, you've done that, and they don't necessarily question whether you know what you're doing. So that's a given in a lot of situations, right? There's no smoke and mirrors there. If you've done it before, it creates some confidence in other people. But what about like leaders who come into the organization who know nothing about the customer or the product? They've never worked in that industry before. You might know more than them about your customer, your industry, your product, your market. How do you buy into that leader when you feel they don't even know what you know? They might be an experienced leader, but how do they buy in? Here is the key. And there's two things I want to talk about that makes people buy in, that makes a leader show up with such confidence that people lean in and buy into whatever they're going. The first thing is leaders who create relationship trust. Leaders set the tone for an organization. There's nothing more powerful than a confident leader who shows humility. I personally believe that humility is the cornerstone of genuine authenticity and unshakable confidence, because you've got to accept you. You've got to accept your limitations. You got to accept your shortcomings. And if you can do that, you have a certain compassion and empathy and understanding for other people. And if you can show up anchored in your acceptance, knowing that you're proficient enough to be in there and you also have a strategy, you can get people to buy in. Doesn't mean you're soft or gentle or even quiet. Confidence expressed through humility and competence builds relationship safety and commitment in an organization. I'll give you a perfect example. Tim Cook, you might be watching this on your iPhone. I'm recording this on a Mac. Apple ain't paying me. That's the last they get, I guess. But Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, emphasizes that staying humble is necessary for gaining the respect of employees despite leading the world's most valuable company. He talks about humility. He gave a commencement speech at Stanford University, I believe is before the pandemic, 2019 rather. In that speech, he said, a humble leader is secure enough to recognize his or her weakness. And because they do that, they're confident enough in themselves, comfortable enough in themselves, they seek the input and talents of people who can bridge the gap of their shortcomings. And by being receptive, when leaders are receptive to outside ideas and assistance, it opens up the creativity in that leader and new avenues for the organization and their employees, because people feel empowered that they own success and they're empowered by the leader. He calls it humility in purpose, meaning that to match the high ambition of being an institutional leader, a corporate leader, having humility with purpose means you're focusing on being a builder rather than just a leader. And to build an organization, it requires people. Tim Cook is known for sitting around a table and being quiet while everyone else speaks. And he weighs the input of multiple people before he gives direction or his opinion. Humility creates relational trust. It empowers other people to show up as their best selves when the leader is humble enough to allow them to be themselves and speak and show up in a way that's authentic. Here's another one. Consistent confidence. To be in the leadership position, because you have the title, people already give you the leadership credibility and respect, the deference. So you're automatically going to get that. But when you show yourself humble and willing to listen and give voice to other people, that makes people follow you. That makes people go in. Here's another thing. Showing consistent confidence about where you're going creates vision. And when people see your vision, it's the shortcut to get people to trust and follow you. because as long as they can see the big picture, they can create a picture for themselves that aligns with that. A great example of that is Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks. And this is a phenomenal story. I don't know, I'm sure most of you have gone to Starbucks. I don't even like coffee, but I go to Starbucks and buy, a cappuccino or something because it's a great place to study. But this is the thing about Howard Schultz. It's a great example of consistent confidence creating vision. Back in the early 80s, Howard Schultz, before he was with Starbucks, was already in New York City, a general manager of a Swedish housing furniture, housing goods manufacturer, not, the one you're thinking of with the modular furniture. This is the 1980s. But he was already doing well in New York City, a general manager awaiting to ascend to be a CEO in an organization. And at the time, one of their products that they sold was the drip coffee makers. And he recognized these expensive drip coffee makers. They sold them to Macy's. They sold them to, Italian, coffee shops that people would go and, get a little bitty cup of coffee, a shot, whatever you call that, you coffee drinkers, espresso. Those are the people who bought those drip coffee makers. But he noticed, and this company that he was working with at the time was a $100 million company, like tens of millions of dollars a year. He recognized that this small mom and pop coffee shop in Seattle called Starbucks bought far more coffee drips than all of his other accounts combined. And he wanted to know what they were doing with the coffee, what they were doing with these drips. So he took a trip out to Seattle to visit the mom and pop shop. The original Starbucks, I don't know if you've been to Seattle. I've been there, but the original Starbucks is down by Fisherman's Wharf. It is a flat out nondescript place, not big at all, but it is the first Starbucks, and they were super busy. So when he went out there, what did he find? He found a whole different culture happening in Seattle. You see, in the early 80s, Seattle was the burgeoning epicenter of Microsoft. And so who fled to Seattle and the Pacific Northwest were engineers, code writers. And he saw the future of work because these were people who could work remotely. They didn't go into office and sit in cubicles. They had to be creative. They sat for long periods of time and they wanted to drink coffee. And I don't know if they listened to music back then or not in the early 80s, but I'm sure they did. But they would go to these Starbucks locations and they would go sit out on the lawn in front of the Starbucks where it was in the Fisherman's Wharf, and they would drink coffee and they would work on code. They would learn things. They were building the future of computers, the future of work. And he fell in love with the culture. So here's what Howard Schultz did. He was so intrigued by what they were doing. He saw a path to expand this brand. And he saw the future of work where people will be working on computers and have to go have a cup of coffee in a nice environment that's like a library, but not like a library. You can still talk in there. That's what he saw when he went and visited Starbucks. And so he pursued the partners of Starbucks at that time for almost a year, wanting to sell them on being their CEO and expanding their vision. For a year, he did not convince them. But one day he finally convinced the owner to sit down and have a serious conversation with him about how he saw the business and why he felt Starbucks was so unique. That owner created a meeting with investors. They sat down with the investors. He thought, this is my one shot to sell them. He gave them everything he got, the big vision. Remember, this is 1981, 1982. And the next day they called him and told him that the board and the owners said no. They didn't want to hire him. And instead of, kind of taking the L, because he had waited a year to get to this point. Even his own mama, and he's on record in saying this, his own mother was especially concerned of, why are you leaving this big New York firm to go to across the country for this little coffee shop? You're doing well. Don't give it up for a company no one's ever heard of, is what Howard Schultz's mother said. Has that ever happened to you? Has that ever happened to you that you had an idea, a vision, or something, and that you let people know about it, and they just like flat out just couldn't see what you saw? Right? How do you keep your confidence? How do you stay consistently confident when people speak against your vision, or who flat out don't believe you, even those who are closest to you, in that you value their opinion? How do you stay consistently confident? Well, Howard Schultz did not take no for an answer. He got off the phone that day, but he called back the very next day because he had to build himself back up, reground himself, reroot himself in knowing that he was the man for this vision, that he was enough to lead this company into what he saw was going to be the next wave of work in America. And so he called them back, and this time he convinced them to take a shot. And what he learned when he called back, when he asked, why did you say no? It was because they didn't feel they were ready for his big vision. This is the Pacific Northwest in the early 80s, very opposite of New York City. And they didn't feel that it was a good fit culturally, nor did they feel that they were able to accomplish what his vision was. And sometimes when people say no, it's not about you, it's about them. When you are passionate and you are confident, what helps is to continue to be confident, even when people tell you no, because it may not be about their belief in you. It is about their belief in themselves. And they don't believe that they can accomplish it, even though you're confident that they can. Howard Schultz has since transformed Starbucks. Can we all agree? Humility creates relationship trust. And as long as it's modeled throughout the organization, when people feel leaders are approachable and authentic, people go all in. That is what happened with Starbucks. That is what happened with Howard Schultz. Not only did he come to the Pacific Northwest to transform this little coffee shop that had something special into a world global phenomenon, but he did it with an eye on profitability, differentiation, but most importantly, he did it with an eye on employees. He came in humble and he stayed consistently confident, and that got people to buy in. It created the psychological safety that people needed, and that's when people are at their best. That's when they feel accepted. And he built the culture of Starbucks around that concept of making the employee not just employees, he made them partners. Consistent confidence fuels vision, and it shifts the energy of people to go all in on things they've never done before. As they see the vision, as they see your vision as a leader, they create a vision for themselves that aligns with the larger organizational vision. Again, I ask, would your team buy into your vision today? Or are they waiting to see if you buy in? For those who are out there, I got free gifts for you. Go to iwantmorenow.com. iwantmorenow.com. I've got 2 books. Claim Your Star Power, 4 Steps to Start Where You Are and Achieve Superstar Success. That is my memoir. I wrote that 15 years ago, but the recent book is an audio book. You can download it on iwantmorenow.com and be listening to it on your device in minutes. Don't leave this podcast, by the way. Open up another window and go do that. iwantmorenow.com. You get Everyday Star Power, the 12-step confidence algorithm. Check that out. Would your team buy into your vision today? Here's the thing. How do you get followers to go all in on things they've never done before or accomplished before? Here's 3 points I want you to have before we get out. CEOs, head coaches, military leaders. These are people who have to get people to go all in on their vision. Why does that happen? These people are masters at owning the narrative. You've got to own the narrative because they've already got a narrative playing in their mind. If you want to get people to go all in on your vision, you've got to control the narrative with humility and being constantly confident. But here's how you control the narrative. You need a clear, emotionally anchored message that signals your conviction that gets people to believe and buy into you. And if they can do that, they can then buy into the vision. Here's how you do that. Write a sentence that says, I believe, and whatever else comes after that. Now, here's some structure to this. So if you listen to this, take these down, write these notes. Here's the structure of the sentence. I believe blank, whatever that outcome is. I believe blank is possible because blank. That blank, you have to fill in the evidence that you know why it's you know why it is possible. Why are you confident? So it is, I believe blank is possible because of this evidence. And here's how we will start. If you're a leader, make sure you write that sentence down. This is how you get people to go all in. And the first step is controlling the narrative. If there's already been an established tradition of innovation in an organization, people who deal with change, people who've broken barriers, who've had new beginnings or turnaround, buy-in tends to be easier and faster because they're in practice of moving. But what happens if you're new in an organization? What happens if you're trying to move people that never done these things before? If no tradition exists of evolving and innovation, you've got to start just with being truthful and show that you care for the people that you're trying to move. How do I know this? I know this because I did this in the life science industry. Here's my statement. You've got to write an I believe statement. Here's my I believe statement as an example. I believe that precision medicine can cure and prevent cancer. You go to my website on romemadison.com, or you go to my other podcast that is an industry podcast where I talk about genetics and genomics and help consumers advocate for themselves, learn the language of precision medicine and genes so they can find their voice in the exam room. I've been in this industry for over 2 decades. I believe that precision medicine can cure and prevent cancer because there is evidence there. What is my evidence? Since I've been in the cancer space for over 2 decades, the ability to sequence the genome has been an evolving science. We take that now and we're able to find genes that drive disease. Specifically in the area of cancer, we can find out what drives certain cancers. For instance, breast cancer. Breast cancer was revolutionized because of genetic and genomic testing. That's my industry. Breast cancer was transformed because before a common gene called HER2 was discovered, most of the women diagnosed with HER2 positive breast cancer died within 5 years or so because it was an aggressive form of cancer. But through genetic testing, through genomic testing, 23 years ago when I started in the industry, that thing that was aggressive, that thing that brought about a poor prognosis and made that caused women with this disease to die earlier, younger, faster, became a good thing. Because now we were able to create a drug that bind to that specific gene that stopped the downstream action of growing a tumor. And now it's a good thing to be HER2 positive because there's a drug. And because that drug came to the market, it reduced the risk of dying of women with HER2 positive breast cancer by 74% in some studies. It more than doubled the life expectancy of women with HER2 positive breast cancer. I believe that we can cure cancer and prevent cancer because of what we've found over the years through genetic and genomic testing. And through the Confidence Clinic, my keynotes, go to romemadison.com, genetics4healthcare.com. This is what I do for the industry. I expand the vision of what they feel is possible to go out and serve more patients, to bridge the gap, to eliminate disparities, to make sure that patients know about this so they can live longer lives. We're able to now test and sequence genes and test to see if you have a gene that raises your risk of cancer. In breast cancer, that's BRCA1 and BRCA2 and a number of other genes, but many people know BRCA1 and BRCA2 because of Angelina Jolie years ago tested positive for that gene. She had a prophylactic mastectomy, which is a preventative surgery where you remove your breast, put on some better reconstructed ones, and now you have a less of a risk, less than 15%. Whereas before, carrying that gene in your original breast tissue put you in a risk category of 60, 70, 80% in some cases. Heck of a trade-off. I believe precision medicine can cure cancer because of this evidence that we've seen in transforming diseases like breast cancer, lung cancer. I interviewed Victoria Gray, which is the first sickle cell patient to be cured of sickle cell issues, the complications from sickle cell. Because of precision medicine and what we know about the genome, we can now manipulate that. It's called gene therapy. First sickle cell patient to be cured. I also interviewed Tom Whitehead, who is the father of Emily Whitehead. Emily Whitehead was the first patient, well, not the first patient, the first child to undergo what is called CAR T therapy. It is gene modification therapy to cure her of acute lymphoblastic leukemia, ALL. When she was 7 years old, everything failed. And the doctors told their family to go home and enjoy the rest of your time with your daughter. Don't put her through any more drugs, therapy, hospital stays. It's not working. But Tom Whitehead had the faith to say, no, my little girl is not going to die. And he submitted to this gene therapy. Let's see. That's probably 10, 15 years ago. What's happened since then? That was a clinical trial. CAR T therapy, gene editing, is now a commercially available therapy. It is paid for through insurance in some situations. Emily not only lived, she became a cover story of the New York Times. Steven Spielberg did a documentary about her life, and she's a healthy college student now. And they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to help people around the world get access to CAR T therapy so they can experience the transformation that Emily did. What am I saying? Control the narrative as a leader. If you want people to go all in, control the narrative, craft your I believe statement. I believe this, whatever that is possible because of this, the evidence, and here's how we start. And how I got people to start is teaching leaders best practices for onboarding reps in the life science industry who could teach and articulate this knowledge to doctors. How in the world are we going to teach doctors about this new technology if you're not a doctor? That's what I teach in the Confidence Coaching Clinic. Second thing you got to know, not only do you have to control the narrative with your I believe statement, work on that. But here's the other thing. You got to build an evidence trail. Confidence that's backed by data reduces doubt. And it also creates momentum when people buy in. As a leader, you have to capture wins and share it publicly with your team to enforce progress. You ever led a team? If those of you who are leaders, you ever led a team, or have you ever been on a team where they share out wins? They share out good stories of people overcoming, or they broke a big case, or they got a big customer in. That's important because it is an evidence trail that shifts the expectation of everyone else in the organization. As a leader, you got to talk to people. going back to the humility thing and being relatable, get close to your team because they know the pulse of the market. They understand what the limitations might be, not only externally in terms of the face of the customer, but internally about people buying into your vision. You got to get close to your team. If you get close to your team, they will be motivated to give you wins. Wins are these stories that inspire people that what you're talking about is possible. It's a demonstration that progress of your vision is moving forward. You got to post some wins. You got to build an evidence trail for people to buy into whatever you're talking about. It shows that it's possible. It raises the bar of expectations and people go all in because the more they expect, the more they get ready for. Before 1954, people thought the limit of a human running the mile was 4 minutes. In fact, the belief was a human cannot run a mile in 4 minutes or your heart would explode. That's what they believed. And then Roger Bannister ran the mile in under 4 minutes in 1954. What happened after that? A month later, John Landy, an Australian, broke that record of a sub 4 minute mile by 2 seconds. Since 1954, 2,000 people have run a mile in under 4 minutes. The more people expect, the more they get ready for. As a leader, if you want people to go all in, you got to collect wins. You got to collect wins and tell people, hey, this is moving. This person over here did that. That team over there did this. What are you guys doing? It expands their belief and their vision of what's possible. And that raises the competitive bar of your team and it gets them to go all in. Here's the third point I don't want you to miss. These are coaching techniques for you as a leader, whether you are in the role of a leader by title or not, on how to get people to follow your dream or vision or direction. The first thing is you've got to control the narrative. You've got to tell a compelling story of what you believe, and you got to tell it consistently. The second thing is you got to build an evidence trail. Show that it's possible. Spotlight the people who are doing the things that you say are possible. And the third thing is practice showing up with confidence. Check this out. Before you go into a meeting, you must anchor yourself. And you have to do this physically to control what's inside, and it controls what comes out. Just take 2 minutes to ground yourself anytime there's a high stakes meeting, because as a leader, your presence sets the atmosphere of the room. Jimmy Giles, thank you, my brother. I know your father, Jimmy Giles, by the way. But that's a good man right there. Jimmy Giles, thank you for tuning in. Mitchell Moore, Enigma, thank you for fighting folks to the Confidence Coaching Clinic. The third coaching point of how you get people to join in and follow you on your dream or vision is you got to show up like a confident person, because your presence sets the atmosphere of the room. Your consistent presence primes others to anchor themselves in confidence and follow. Now, how do you do that? There's a number of ways you can do that. We're not going to get deep into that. Maybe that's another conversation for another time on how to anchor yourself physically and the techniques that we teach in the Confidence Coaching Clinic to anchor yourself with confidence and show up with confidence, with executive presence, to be more influential, to be more persuasive. Before every important conversation, you need to run a quick 3-minute ritual to control your breathing, to be attentive of your posture, speak affirmations over yourself or incantations that tells yourself, I'm all in, I'm in control. Whatever those are, you can create those for yourself. But the purpose of this check is to calm and focus your your inside, your spirit, so you can be intentional with every movement. Here's two things that you need to remember about showing up with confident presence, executive presence. The first thing, be quiet. Embrace the silence, man. Others don't know how to respond to you if you are not saying anything. They can't tell whether you are upset. They can't tell whether you're convinced. It keeps them off balance. Silence is powerful when you're talking about showing up with confidence. Here's the other thing silence does. Even if you're nervous, even if you don't have any idea what's going on, you can still look confident as hell just sitting there not saying nothing. Most people mess it up when they open their mouth. Silence can be golden in this situation because your calm strength and poise will give you leverage in that situation because, one, it'll unsettle other people who are not that confident in themselves. But the other thing, for people who do have high self-confidence and high self-esteem, your calm strength soothes them and it gives them more confidence because of how you're showing up. So embrace the silence. Here's the second thing. If you do speak, remember, you ain't messing nothing up if you don't speak. But how you show up with executive presence is that when you do speak, ask questions of other people. When you ask questions, you're in control because it keeps them talking. It keeps them spilling out their ideas. And it allows you to speak in a clear and measured tone, taking your time to respond, even if they ask you a question. If they ask you a question, it may unsettle you a little bit and you get anxious because you're searching for the answers in your head. Take a beat, breathe, calm yourself internally. It doesn't matter how long it takes for you to answer. You answer when you're ready, and it shows that you're in control, you have poise, and you are the confident, clear leader and communicator. Silence is golden, and if you do speak, ask questions and speak in a calm, measured, confident tone. Consistent presence of this confident energy is a signal to others that they need to get in and follow you. Somebody says it just feels like you being arrogant. I get that. What you have to do is reframe that thought. Showing up and not saying nothing, bragging about things that are going on, constantly boasting about what you believe. Some people think that's arrogance. You just need to reframe it because we're talking about behavioral science. This is why people follow. Confidence rooted in humility and evidence invites people to follow. There's a difference between confident humility and arrogance. People are repelled by arrogance. Some people are attracted by arrogance, but it doesn't make people go all in. What makes people go all in is that calm spirit in that humble presence that calms everybody, that sets the temperature of a room or an organization. Okay, I hear you. Rome, if I do all this and I still don't feel confident, I get that too. But accept it. Accept the fact that, you know what, I don't feel confident, but reinforce the fact that you are enough to be confident in what you believe. You've got to accept yourself, because if you don't accept who you are, if you don't recognize that, you know what, I don't feel confident in this moment and I accept that, no one else is going to accept you either. Because what comes next is remind yourself of the evidence that says that you can do it. Now, I don't know what that is for you. Maybe you have a past track record of success. Maybe you've never done it yourself, but you believe in a higher power that's giving you a vision and confidence that you can and will succeed. The highest skill that a leader has is the ability to inspire. Remind yourself to act with purpose and intention, because you cannot feel your way into taking action. You must act your way into feeling confident. It's when you decide to move is when confidence begins. And so if you do these things and you don't feel confident, my advice, do it again and do it again and do it again. Because the more you do it, the more confident you get. There's not hard or easy. There's familiar and there's unfamiliar. When you're unfamiliar with something, you don't have high confidence. But the more familiar you are with it, the more confidence you have. What makes you familiar? Doing it until you feel that you're familiar. Because you cannot act your way. You cannot feel your way into acting. You must act your way into feeling. We're here every week, 9:00 Central. The Confidence Coaching Clinic live on YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And when this comes out, it's not out, by the way, on Spotify, but it will be out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts. Subscribe to it. We're here every week. This is the Confidence Clinic. Go to iwantmorenow.com. Get your free books, Everyday Star Power, the 12-step confidence algorithm. Hit me up on the socials, romaddison.com. We out. Thank you for joining.